Hi, this is John S. Couch. I'm the author of The Art of Creative Rebellion. And what I'm going to talk about today is a bit about creative health. Creative health in the sense of creative health for the creative self, in terms of putting it in the same kind of context that the theme is about. I want to talk about how we devote our time. And we spend so much of our days and so much of our time involved with work, obviously. We have to make money. And in this time of COVID-19, we're lucky if we have a job. And I'm spending about 7 to 8 hours a day on Zoom in general. And when I'm not doing that, I'm spending time with my family, which is also important. But what happens, I think, is that we have decided in society that, of course, your day job's important. And of course, your friends and family are important. But what we lose at times is our sense of self. And what I mean by that is that we will be justified somewhat in working out, because we have to be healthy. So we go to the gym, or nowadays we probably have to do push-ups in between meetings, or we do stairs or what have you in order to keep our bodies moving. Good stuff. The other thing that we do is we take care of our mental health, whether it's meditating, using apps like Headspace, or whether it's doing something like going to therapy. Whatever it is for you, also good. The third thing I think is missing is our creative health. And what this involves is me time, or what's considered to be me time in general. And what I mean by that is that because we spend so much of our time focused on work, and we feel very justified in that because we're doing something which is socially sanctioned and necessary for buying groceries and necessary for basically life. But what we often neglect and what we often don't spend time on are me time things, because it's considered to be a bit indulgent and selfish. But my argument is that for creative innovation, the ability to function better at work, you need time on your own. You need time to sit and contemplate and center. Part of this, to me, leads to the counterintuitive notion that investing an hour a day on something that's exclusively for you actually recharges your batteries. So for me, for example, I get up early. I'm not a morning person. I hate getting up early. But I get up at 5:30 in the morning, and then I spend time trying to wake up, first of all. I have a morning brew that I make, and then I meditate for about 15 minutes. After that, I spend time writing. I write for an hour, hour and a half. I write an essay every week. And then on top of that, I also write fiction and nonfiction. And what this does, it invigorates me. It makes me feel for a moment that I'm doing something which is tied to my sense of self. And we spend all of our days giving it all away. We give away our energies, and it's good things. We give our energies, and we should be engaged with work. We should be engaged with our families and our friends. But we also have to recharge the battery. And by allowing an unmitigated connection between you and your creative activity, whatever it is, by the way, it can be anything. For me, it's writing in the morning, and in the evening, it's painting. But for you, it could be yoga. It could be going for a walk. It could be learning a new language. Whatever it is, it's just for you. And there's no need to think of it as a side hustle, like I got to make money from this. You're already making money, or you're doing something to make money, or you're trying to make money already. This is separate from that. This is directly engaged with you as a person. So what we're going to talk about today is creative health and how we express that. And I'm going to do this not only metaphorically, but I'm going to do it physically through a painting. So behind me is a blank canvas, literally the tabula rasa. And anytime you embark into the unknown, there's huge risk that's involved. You don't know what's going to happen. But throughout the course of this particular masterclass, I'm going to be recording alongside with you my own thoughts and feelings in paint. And I'm going to keep painting, and then I'm going to cover it up, paint, cover it up, paint, cover it up. And at the end will be an artifact, a memory, so to speak, of the process of being in the creative flow of the moment that we're both in right now. So with that, we're going to begin. So I would welcome you to, first of all, pick up worksheet number 1. You are your greatest design problem. This is something that we often don't think about, but if you think about it as a designer, you spend a lot of time problem solving for business and for clients. But if you think about it on a macroscopic scale of your life, from when you are relatively conscious all the way to whenever you end, there's a lot of time in between there that we just kind of like move from point to point. And we have to, of course, because no one can totally plan exactly how their life's going to go. But if you think about it in general day-to-day practice, I'm not talking about like I have to be sticking to a plan exactly that goes out to a certain period of time in the future, but right now, in this moment, because the time is always now, and now is always the time. So with worksheet 1, we're going to look at a day in the life. So what I'm going to do now is actually start to paint out on that thing a day in the life and the kind of questions that I ask myself and I'll be asking you. So I'm going to go ahead and write out a day in the life, kind of an homage to the Beatles song, A Day in the Life. Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. So, what happens? Number 1, you wake up. Number 2, get coffee. Number 3, breakfast, etc. This sounds really pedantic, and of course, but the question is, as you go through and you are making your schedule for the day, be brutally honest. Not like what you like to be doing, but what do you actually do? What's actually happening in your day-to-day life? How are you spending time? Because time is the most valuable asset you have. You're going to get paid every 2 weeks if you're lucky. You will have insurance if you're lucky. And those are wonderful things. And having work and having a sense of purpose is incredibly important. But no matter how much you get paid, if you're doing a job that you don't feel good about or you're not engaged with, then you're kind of just working for the money. And yes, again, reality dictates that working for the money is a good thing. I don't discount that at all. But what I'm saying is that in addition to doing whatever you're doing, you should be always keeping the things that you love in mind. So as you go through and you look at your day, you have to think about what are the things that are important to you. So we have a day in the life. Now, what I want you to do at this point, put a pause on your video. If you haven't already downloaded the PDF, please do so. And spend about maybe 5 to 10 minutes just going through it. And starting at the very beginning when you wake up, how many hours of sleep did you have? What did you eat for breakfast? How long did you take? How long did you take to get to work if you are commuting? Or did you zoom in? How long did that take? Etc. Break it down minute by minute, hour by hour, as much as you can, including the times that you spend watching TV, on social media, what have you. It's all okay. There's no judgment. No one's going to see this but you. But the important thing is that you actually are brutally honest about what it is that's going on in a typical Tuesday, or whatever day you happen to be thinking about. So while you spend the next few minutes writing that down, I'm going to continue painting. So as I'm actually working on a painting, a lot of things go through my head. I think about, well, I try not to think too much about art historical reference because I heard this really great quote by Agnes Martin. Agnes Martin was a very famous minimalist artist, and she said, the moment you start thinking about Picasso when you're painting, you're screwed. So don't. But I can't help it. I still kind of think about other precedents. And what's interesting to me about abstraction is that it came out of turn of the century in the 20th century, I have the idea that the camera had made representational art somewhat obsolete. So they had to find new ways of expressing themselves. Hilma af Klint has recently been rediscovered as being the first abstract artist of any note, before Kandinsky, by the way, who actually did these amazing giant paintings in secret that are just now coming out and being right now exhibited at the Guggenheim. So in some ways, I take inspiration because my head's full of art history and design precedent. But what I try to do is when I'm in the moment and I'm thinking about a day in the life, I'm thinking about, in this case, how the paint itself feels a bit like a Franz Kline. Franz Kline was an abstract expressionist painter in the 1950s who was influenced by Willem de Kooning. And he did these amazing black and white paintings, which were just powerful because what they did is they took a lot of the kind of tradition of the Asian arts, Japanese sumie art or ink painting, and applied it writ large on a canvas. And what I found fascinating about that is that supposedly the story is that Franz Kline was over hanging out with Willem de Kooning back in the late 40s and early 50s, and Franz Kline was stuck. And de Kooning said, you're always walking around doing these little sketches on, ink sketches on paper, and you're putting them in your pocket. Pull one of those out. So he did. And then what de Kooning did is he took that sketch that Franz Kline had made and put it on an overhead projector, and then projected that onto a giant canvas. And suddenly Franz Kline goes, holy crap, that kind of effect that I wanted to get with the brush, the ability to get this kind of movement, was impossible to do if I was calculating it. However, blowing it up, and this is a design problem that's been solved, I can now take the immediacy and urgency of that ink painting, blow it up on this, and reproduce it and feel the same kind of energy. So I think about Franz Kline when I'm painting. I think about, most recently, a more contemporary example is Christopher Wool, who works with enamel and alkyds on an aluminum surface. And it's a smooth surface, and part of his challenge was to continue to make painting relevant beyond the fact that representation's been kind of played out. Now, all art's great. Any kind of art that you do, wonderful. If you go onto the internet, you'll pretty much see everybody going, it looks like a photograph, but it's really a pencil drawing. And that's fine, that's craft. But the important thing about anything you're doing that's, quote, art in a large sense, whether it's writing or music or theater or dance, is to do something that has meaning and purpose for you. That's not just pure craft, but actually has soul. And the question of soul, to me, is always been brought into the fact that there's the idea in the Japanese characters of ki. Ki means energy or life force in Japanese. It's the ki in Aikido. Ki is the idea in Chinese of chi. And the idea is that when you are working on anything creative, you must put that in there. And I have this kind of feeling, where I have a very strong feeling, that ki is captured in the moment that you are actually laying down anything, whether it's paint or your finger on a keyboard or on a guitar. It's captured, memorized. The work is memorized by the canvas, whatever state you're in. According to Robert Henry of the Ashcan School, who wrote an amazing book called The Art Spirit, paint captures it. And everything you do is captured in general by the state that you're in. There's another wonderful apocryphal story about the world's, well, supposedly Japan's greatest samurai, Miyamoto Musashi, who back in the 1500s said, you sweep and you rake leaves the same way that you would hold a sword. The point being that you don't go into art mode at one point. You don't go into design mode. You're always in the state of constant meditation, of thinking creatively. Even if you're waiting tables, there's a Zen-like approach to where you can actually be one with the thing that you're doing at the time that you're doing it, so that everything that you do expresses the character and state of mind that you're in. So, with that being said, I'm putting a little bit of pressure on how this painting comes out, because if I'm in the correct state of mind, there's no way this painting won't turn out to be at least interesting. because everything I'm talking to you about, I personally find interesting, and I'm hoping that that key goes into this work. Big question that you have to ask yourself is, what's your story? What is the story you're telling yourself? We're defined by stories. We're born into story. You've inherited stories from your parents about how life works. You've inherited stories from perhaps your religion. You've inherited stories that you associate with the country you were born in, the state you were born in, maybe even the town you were born in. And these are all good. These are all meant as constructive ways of getting you from point A to point B through life. But at a certain point, the notion of creative rebellion for me is to not attack, but question, why do I think the way that I think? Because those stories have huge effect on how you walk through life. So this section we're calling What's Your Story, because we're going to talk about what it is you really want to be when you grow up. But in order to get there first, I'm going to take a look at what my day is, and now I'm going to cover it up for the moment. And it's important to realize that creativity is a huge form, in a lot of ways, of destruction. Creatively, constructively destructing. So what I'm going to do is something that would terrify most people when they're in the middle of working on something, but it's important to get rid of things that don't serve you anymore. And then new things mutate out of that process. This is white, supposedly, but as you can tell, it's going to be the color that it wants to be. And what's amazing about the creative process is that once you're in the flow, it takes you where it wants to take you, and all you have to be is a conduit to that. The hard thing about that is that it requires the idea that you are negating your own ego, but you're not. Ego is actually something that gets in the way of progression, because if you think about it, ego is actually the need to connect to what is. And it means you're change averse because you want the world to keep functioning the way that it has been. Because we, as human beings, love stability. And that's good and fine. We all need stability, but the reality is you get stability through the embracing of the unknown. It's through not clinging that you actually find how to flow with life. So what we're going to do next is talk about what it is you really want to be as an adult. And what I mean by that, yes, you have a profession. Maybe you're lucky that your profession is the thing you've always wanted to do. Fantastic. I guarantee you there's things that were deferred from childhood. The thing that you loved doing when you were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old is still in you. It's a thing that still occasionally comes up in a conversation or comes up in a feeling of longing. So I'm literally talking about the crazier the better and what you're thinking about for this worksheet number 2. I want you to write down everything that you ever wanted to do or be when you were a child. Fireman, neuroscientist, astrophysicist, whatever it is, write it down. And if it's embarrassing and if it's really something that you feel kind of gross about even talking about, make sure you write it down. Because remember, this worksheet's just for you. No one else has to see it, but it's good to get it out. So for me, I find there's many things that I wish I could have done when I was younger that I wish I had done as an adult, but I'm continuing to try to pursue it. Number one, if I'm being completely honest about everything, is I always wanted to be a full-time artist. Now, that's a broad enough term to where I can apply it to everything that I'm doing, whether it's painting, literally making art, or if I'm actually making a film, TV show, if I'm writing, that's all creative endeavors. So I'm a little bit lucky that I got that, but to be a little bit more vulnerable about what I really am interested in doing, I've always been kind of interested in stand-up comedy. And I find that stand-up is probably the most terrifying thing a person can do. literally putting yourself out there on the edge. Anything can fail at any time, but you keep doing it. To me, is a huge metaphor with stand-up and actually living. And probably part of my attempts and my pushing myself to speak publicly is the fact that I'm an introvert by nature. And I had to really learn how to embrace the part of me that's terrified of public speaking. And by doing things like this, it actually helps me break through and not cling to my ego-based ideas of what my own story is. So, but I got to go back and keep thinking about what it is I really wanted to do when I was a kid. So, in addition to that, I also loved Bruce Lee. I always wanted to be a martial artist. So, I think it's important that you consider every single thing that was important to you. And what happens too, and this is part of the difficulty of finding me time, is that you feel subtle pressures too. There's the idea that if you're doing a full-time job, how do you have time to do, I don't know, write a book? Are you not paying attention to your job? Or are you not paying attention to your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your children? There's always that strange undercurrent of pressure that happens. The strangest thing about creative people is that they have to go through a gauntlet that's unbelievable. It's hard enough to create. It's hard enough to be vulnerable. But then you have societal pressures that are kind of like telling you as you get older, you shouldn't be really doing that much anymore. You know, shouldn't you kind of grow up on this? Ironically and paradoxically, if you make it as a musician, if you make it as a screenwriter, if you make it as an astrophysicist, you're suddenly venerated. You know, you go from basically the bottom of the barrel to the top. In case in point, a famous writer named Charles Bukowski became somewhat famous late in career, well, very late in career. And he spent most of his life working in a post office and was treated like crap, had terrible jobs, drank too much, smoked too much, was considered by everybody to be a loser, but he wrote exquisite poetry, real poetry that was from the heart. And everybody who gave him crap suddenly goes, oh yeah, I used to work with him at the post office. So all the tragedy that's happening right now becomes adventure, you know, basically on afterthought. Suddenly you can talk about it, and it's been talked about you in a way that becomes part of your legend, becomes part of your world. So anyway, I would say you need to spend about, I don't know, give yourself exactly 10 minutes to write unmitigatedly all your thoughts about what you wanted to do when you were just 7 years old. Make the list, run it down. I think for me, in addition to being an artist, being in a stand-up, I probably also would list being a film director or a TV director. Clearly I have a theme. I'm very interested in like making things, but this is just my particular story that I've defined for myself. Your story is completely up to you and what you want to do. Allow yourself to do the craziest list you can possibly do. So what we're going to do next is actually look at worksheet number 2, which is the one you just completed about the craziest things you've always wanted to be when you were younger. Choose one. Doesn't matter which one, just choose one. And what you're going to do is you're going to write on worksheet number 3, a new day. So choosing that one thing, what's it require for you to actually move things around from worksheet number 1 so you can start to actualize the thing that you have always wanted to try? Give yourself 1 hour a day. It doesn't matter if it's in the morning or in the evening. It doesn't matter if it's, sometime at lunch. I actually find that taking a walk at lunch and allowing myself the indulgence of thinking about what it is I love for 1 hour, 1 hour out of your whole day, out of your whole life, you're devoting to everybody else and everything else. Doesn't seem like a whole lot, of sacrifice. But what you have to do is, again, be okay with not being exactly what you want it to be. If you're a 60-year-old man, becoming an astrophysicist might be difficult, but it's not impossible. You just need to spend time going online, meeting groups, getting educated, but for an hour a day, that's all you do. You focus on that, and you take what was before and you build on it, and you build on it. So what you're seeing here is creatively taking what was underneath and adding to it. And so my thinking about what my ideal day would include doing the thing that probably terrifies me the most, which would be probably stand-up comedy. Honestly, it's a thing that I've always admired, and I admired, as I mentioned earlier. And in some ways, this is my attempt at actually performing and working out a little bit of how that might work. So, as you can see here, I'm covering up. But as I'm covering up the past and what came before, the history of what is underneath it still shows through. Something new is being made. Something that did not exist before is now come into existence. Whether one likes it or not, it is here. And the important thing to realize, because there's been billions of people born and died before you. There's going to be trillions who are going to be here after we're all gone. There is no competition. There is none. Think about it. Who are you competing with? For what? To what end? Acknowledgement? Get acknowledged. Who cares? But the reality is you have to acknowledge yourself and acknowledge the moment that you're in and enjoy it. I'm actually enjoying this. Did not expect that. This is kind of turning out to be a lot more fun than I realized. But the exercise of talking to you guys while doing this is, interestingly enough, forcing me to be looser about my creative process than I normally would be, because, like many people, I'm too in my head. What we have to do, our exercise, is to get ourselves out of our heads. So for 1 hour a day, give yourself the luxury. So look at your worksheet number 3 now. Go through it. Are you up at 5 a.m.? Do you normally get up at 7? Get up at 6. Whatever it is, pull it back. Or do you have an hour at lunch that you can do that novel you've always wanted to be doing? Do it. Write on Post-it notes. It doesn't matter. No one cares. No one has to see it. Same thing with dancing. If you want to be a dancer, take lessons at night. Take lessons online. Do it in the safety and privacy of your own bathroom. Who cares? Just do it. You are here to create. The energy of life is twofold. One is entropy. Everything is slowly falling apart. Even the universe is falling apart. It's a strange thing, right? But what works against that is life, evolution, which actually takes complexity and makes it even more complex and makes even bigger systems more complex. Two things working against each other. Chaos, which then becomes a thing. These are the two elements of yin-yang that you should be thinking about whenever you're working on your creative work. Now we've gone through the whole process. Number 1, you have thought about your day. How did your day go? How does it go in general? How does a typical Tuesday go? Number 2, you thought about the things that are truly important to you, that come from childhood, and you took one of those. And number 3, you built a new schedule based upon that. So what we have in the end is the foundation of that thought process, of that thinking going on. And what we're going to do next is actually then move it from being in a state of black and white, because life is not that way. And what we're going to do is then add color to it and add energy and add the thing I was talking about in terms of key. So here we go. This is randomization, but I'm also going with intuition intuition based upon years of having been a painter, a creator, an artist. And the question always is, why that? Why that choice? Why did that happen? I don't know exactly. But if you also think about it, since the Big Bang, all the particles in the world, all the elements in the world have been coming together one after the other to make us, to make where we are now, to make this moment happen. So is this random? Is abstraction random? Maybe. I'm not sure. I kind of find it to be strangely formative because I'm a big believer in the fact that, again, the art itself captures the energy of the person as they're making it. And too much analysis can take the beauty out of something. I think there's something gorgeous about the fact that the painting decides to make itself and do what it wants to do. So one of the most important notions in Zen Buddhism is the idea of the Enso. It's the idea of the circle. And the circle represents both the void, mu, emptiness, as well as the universe. So what we're going to do is cap off this painting with the Enso and realize this is an artifact of the creative process. There's a history of paint, history of story beneath it. And what you have to realize as you paint is that the process of making, there is no failure in the process. There is only stopping. And what you want to do is make sure that you don't stop. The Enso typically is one perfect circle. I'm going to modify it and make multiple circles of the Enso because there is no perfection, because everything is in flux and everything is already perfect. And with that, we end the class on the creative self and the creative way of expressing oneself through a creative life. We end where we began. Keep rebelling creatively.